In this lesson, we're going to be looking at learning the notes on the E and A strings. Now, why would we want to do that? Well, really, by knowing the notes in these two strings, we know where we can play power chords, scales, arpeggios, bar chords, that type of thing. It's a way of orientating ourselves on the neck, rather than just kind of randomly kind of playing about until you can hear the note that you're trying to play. Now, it doesn't matter what instrument you play, what we tend to do is use letters to denote pitches. And the letters that we use are between A and G in the alphabet. So we use letter A, B, C, D, E, F, and then G. So that's all the letters that we use. Other kind of countries use different letters. You may have a different way of, denoting it in other kind of cultures, but that's the kind of predominant music system that's used around the world. Now, there's actually gaps in between each of these notes. Now, if you think about a piano keyboard, the letters A to G are the white keys on a piano, but as you know, you have all the black keys in between as well. Now, if you were to play all them together, you'd be actually playing something called the chromatic scale, which sounds a big kind of fancy sounding thing. But really what that means is all the 12 notes that we use in our music system. Now the guitar, as you can see, goes up to 12 frets. So you can see there's a connection there. That's because the guitar is a chromatic instrument. We can play all the notes that we use in our music system, and some in between because we can do string bends and things. But what I want to concentrate on in this part of the lesson is looking at the natural notes. So that's just the A to G, okay? So what we're going to do is start with the open A string. It's easier because it's alphabetical. So that's our A string there. So it's an open A. Now the next note is B. Now B is 2 frets away from A. So it's on the 2nd fret of that A string there. 2 frets, or sometimes you may think of it as a whole tone or 2 semitones. So the guitar is laid out in semitones, so each fret you move up a semitone, or sometimes people call it a half tone. So if you're moving up 2 frets, you have a whole tone or a full step. There's different terminology for it. But B is essentially a tone away from that open A string. So it's B there at the 2nd fret. Next note is C. It's right next door to B. So this is quite an important thing to remember. B and C are right next door to each other there. So they're just a semitone apart. The next note is D, which is here at the 5th fret. Okay, so that's a tone away from C. Next note after that is E. Now that's a tone away from D here. Okay, the next note is F, which is there at the 8th fret. It's right next to E. It's a semitone away. Now the interesting thing about B and C and E and F being right next to each other, if you look at a piano keyboard, that's your pair of keys that are right next to each other. When you look at the white keys, that's your B and C and E and F. So that's the important thing to always remember, that they're just a fret apart, each of them, B and C and E and F. Now after F, we've got our last note, which is G. Now that's 2 frets or a tone away from the F there. And then if I go yet another 2 frets or tone, I get to the 12th fret here and I get to another A. This A here is actually double the frequency of that A. Think about the kind of physics of the string. What I've done is I've halved the length of the string, and therefore I've doubled the kind of frequency. But that's why the 12th fret is a kind of magical midpoint, and really everything would start all over again. Okay, so that's your A at the 12th fret there. So if I go through it slowly again, you've got A, then you've got B at the 2nd fret, C at the 3rd fret, D at the 5th fret, then you've got E at the 7th fret, and F is at the 8th fret there, and G is at the 10th, and then you've got A again, starting all over again at the 12th fret. Okay. Now, interesting thing about the string markers, you can actually use these as a guide. Now what you'll find when you're learning notes is you count up. So if you needed to find D, for example, you may start at A, then B, then C, then D. So you're always kind of almost like climbing up a ladder to find the note. But if you knew the C was at the 3rd fret there, you'd already be starting a couple of rungs up the ladder. So to find D, you would just go, well, I know that's two semitones above the C, so it's just there. So it's quite handy if you try and, to begin with, see if you can memorise the notes at the 3rd, 5th and 7th fret here. So at the 3rd fret of the A string it's a C, then at the 5th fret it's a D, and then at the 7th fret here it's an E. So it goes C, D, E. And that's quite handy to remember. As I said, you can start from there to work out others. For example, if I needed to know where F was, if I knew that E was here, I know F is right next to it, so I just go up 1 fret. Okay? Also, it's a little bit harder, but you can go back the way. So if you were starting at the top of the ladder, so if I'm at A here, if I needed to find G, I know it's before A, and it's a tone before A, so I go to G there. Or if I needed to find F, same thing, I know that's A, that must be G, F is a tone behind that, so it must be there. Okay, so there's various ways of kind of doing it. Once you get the concept of it, it's just repetition. Repeating and repeating and repeating and repeating. Now, as I said, I've got some exercises in the handout that accompanies the lesson, but if you want, you could try, pick a random letter between A and G. If you've got a tuner, plug the guitar in. So if you say, I'm going to try and play an F, play the note and then look at the tuner and see if it says F on it. That'll give you your answer. If you were selected out and you play D, and then obviously the tuner would see E, and then you would know you'd go up a fret. Because it is tricky to kind of test yourself on your own for this. But that way of just repetition, what you end up doing is you just begin to kind of fill in the kind of blanks. Let's now look at the natural notes on the E string. So this time we're starting from E. Now the next note is F, and if you remember, that's only a fret away from E. So if I'm starting from nothing or 0, it's the 1st fret here. So that's F at that 1st fret. Next note is G, that's a tone away, so it's here. Next note is A, that's a tone away, so it's here at the 5th fret. The next note is B, that's also a tone away, it's here at the 7th fret. Then the next note after that is C, and if you remember, that's one of our special cases, that's just a fret away, so that's at the 8th fret there. And our next note is D, which is a tone away, so it's here. And our next note after that is E, and that's at the 12th fret. And as I said about the A string, that's the magic midpoint. So if I'm starting from open E, if I go to the 12th fret, that has to be an E as well. It's just double the frequency. Okay? So, you can see here, if you were looking at, as I mentioned with the A string, trying to find known rungs on the ladder, you could use the 3rd, 5th and 7th fret again. On the E string, the 3rd fret is G, the 5th fret is A, and then you've got B at the 7th fret. So you've got G, A, B. So as I said, if you were trying to find out where C was, instead of counting up from E, E, F, G, A, B, C, which you'll find you'll be doing at the beginning, once you know these particular starting points, these rungs, you could start, well, I know that C is right next to B, I know B is there, so C must be there. Okay? As I said with A string, we have the same idea where I've got some exercises there that allow you to, just pick a note between A and G and see if you can play it on the fingerboard. And you could use the tuner, as I said earlier as well, to plug in to test yourself. Okay? So these are just the natural notes. It's just either A, B, C, D, E, F, or G. And the reason why I'm doing the natural notes to begin with is the gaps in between them we'll look at in the next part of the lesson. And that way, if you know these natural notes, you just have to basically go in between the natural notes to find the gaps.